Well, it's a beautiful day out here. It is going to hit 70 degrees right now. I'm just in t-shirt and shorts. And yeah, really enjoying this gardening weather. So, hey everybody, let's get out there. Well, it's that time of the season when my peppers and tomatoes are outgrowing the cell trays. So I'm in the process of potting them up. I've tried potting them into 4-inch pots, red solo cups, and even 1-gallon pots in the past. The advantage of the 1-gallon pot is that I can keep them growing in a pot longer if needed. And that would be if the weather takes longer to warm up this year. But I don't think I'm going to need that, so I'm going to be using a combination of the 4-inch square pots and the red solo cups. I like the consistency that the square pots give me in terms of fitting into the trays, but I love the extreme cheapness of the red solo cups. Not only were they extremely cheap to buy new, but I've been reusing these for several years. Some of these red solo cups I've had for as much as 5 years now. In terms of the potting mix that I use at this stage, it's some Grimm's potting mix, and mixed with some peat. The Grimm's is closer to outside soil, but not quite. And I also throw in some all-purpose fertilizer. They need to eat at this stage for sure. Like the eggplants that were already potted up, the peppers will kind of hang out in the warmth of the basement nursery a little longer than the tomatoes. The peppers and eggplants like it a bit warmer than tomatoes, but they have a longer kind of growth time in the nurseries because I start them earlier. So the eggplants and peppers are started before the tomatoes, but they just hang out in the nursery longer than the tomatoes will. I expect that I will be potting up tomatoes this week, and then I'll plant out maybe the second week of May. If all goes well, we'll see how the weather cooperates. Then the peppers and the eggplants would probably go out the last week of May, pending we get warmer nights here. Well, I overdid it this week on the hip, and it wasn't from gardening. As of last week, I was doing a daily walk of about a half hour, and while my leg felt tired afterwards, it was manageable, and it didn't really affect the rest of my day dramatically. But this week I tried to do a longer walk, and it was uphill a bit, and I think it was about 50 minutes or so around the neighborhood. I had a cane with me, but I ended up having to hobble back to the house. My leg was giving out, and it was hurting, and I iced and took Tylenol. I was able to do some seed starting later in the day. So then the next day I tried to go back to just doing a 20 to 30 minute walk, but my leg just wouldn't have it. And at the end of that, it was pretty painful, and I had to just lay with ice for a half hour or so and take pills for the pain before I could even concentrate to just do anything. The pain was radiating from my knee down to my shins, so I'm not really sure if it's originally from the hip itself or if it was overexerting the rest of the leg because the hip was too tired. What I'm taking from this is that there is still a limit on how much I can do here. Fortunately, over the week, I've done a lot of gardening without really hitting that limit, but it seems to be related to sustained walking. For now, I'm having to limit my activity, including some of the gardening, which is tough because we've got a beautiful day out in the garden this week. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll be better next week. I mentioned another segment talking about how long I've reused my red solo cups. The other item that I recycle are these black plastic 6-cell trays. I like to get them in these 6 packs. They're separated as opposed to kind of a large connected sheet because that allows me to mix and match. A lot of things I plant aren't at a quantity that fits an entire 10-20 tray. So I may plant a single 10-20 tray with several different kinds of seeds, and later having those cells in separate trays is super handy. In fact, back in the day when I got my original set of trays, they were in big box stores. They were in those big sheets, and I would separate them with a utility knife. That was before I knew I could buy them that way. Today I don't do that. I buy them from Amazon in separate 6-cell trays, but it's still true that I recycle these trays. As soon as their seedlings are potted up or planted in the outdoor beds, I place them in the to-be-washed pile. I've washed them in a variety of ways over time, including a bleach solution, but now I just kind of stick them in a tub with some simple dish soap and agitate them a bit. That doesn't clear out every particle of dirt, but really I'm just going to be putting dirt back in them. I haven't noticed any particular trend in mold or fungus arising from the different tray hygiene practices I've had, so I suspect most of what I do there is for my own comfort than for really hardcore disinfecting. I'd like to say that I've held on to these trays for 5 years like some of the red solo cups, but unfortunately, and perhaps due to the quality of what I buy, they don't really seem to last more than 2 to 3 years. And at 3 years, we're kind of stretching it and they're tearing, and you can kind of see an example of kind of how they tear. And I'll still use this one because it's only teared in those sections there. This time of year, I need to move seedlings into their next home to free up trays for starting more seeds as quickly as I can. Well, as much as I love a day like this, as you can see in the greenhouse, I've got the shades pulled because it's 75 degrees. It's not even noon yet. It's 75 degrees in the greenhouse. And, you know, this time of year in the greenhouse, I have our cooler loving plants. I don't have like the tomatoes and peppers and eggplants, which would love the heat. I don't have those in here because the temperatures are too extreme, right? At night, the temperatures are still down into we're lucky this week that we're getting into the 40s. Last week, temperatures were down below 40s. And those hot loving plants just wouldn't like it out here at night, even though the daytime temps can get, you know, in 90 degrees if I leave the shades unpulled. So I've got that juxtaposition to deal with of, you know, either somehow keeping it warm at night for warm loving plants in here, or somehow keeping it cool in the day for the cool loving plants. And I choose to work on just keeping it cool during the day at this time of the year. Hey there. Watering seedlings is something I'm still kind of learning to do right. I saw a video last week from MIGardener, and some of the things that Luke was saying kind of made sense and rang true to me in terms of what I experience and deal with in watering seedlings in here. I think one of the things that you hear a lot is bottom watering. That part, you'll see that I don't do that. I do it sometimes, but not at scale, because the number of seedlings that I have and the time that I have to like sit and kind of put seedlings in a pan for 15 minutes and let them soak up the water and then empty the pan. I mean, it takes too long. And so, you know, maybe in the long run I lose more seedlings because I overhead water than if I were to bottom water. But for the number of seedlings that I grow, I think that ratio is okay. I can live with that because I lose too much time by just kind of trying to sit and do that kind of bottom watering technique. I wonder if any of you have had a similar issue or thought about it. I do see how bottom watering would be a lot better, but a couple of things that Luke said that I am trying to incorporate more into my practice that I think made sense to me was, one is, you know, kind of the big one, which I think I've been guilty of this, is, you know, you shouldn't be trying to water your seedlings in a way that like covers them for an entire week, right? You should anticipate that you're going to water your seedlings in an environment like this. You're going to water your seedlings, you know, every day or at least every other day. And so, you know, don't soak your seedlings so much that they just are drowning in the water. Water them enough to cover, you know, that they'll be able to dry out in the next day or so, and with the anticipation that you'll water them again. And I think that was a big revelation to me, because I was realizing that as these seedlings grew, that's effectively what I had gotten into. But to hear somebody say it was very confirmatory of, oh, okay, yeah, I'm on the right path there. You know, Luke said what I was feeling and doing, and so that made it feel like it was the right thing. The other part of that is having enough grit in your compost. And similar to me, Luke was talking about using perlite. Sounds like that's what he uses. And just thinking, I think I may misquote him here, but I think he may have said up to 50% perlite. And I was like, wow, that's a lot. But then looking at some of the other kind of YouTube gardeners and their kind of indoor nursery, similar to what I have set up here, they may not have said it, but you can see in their potting mix that they've got quite a bit of their seedling mix. They've got a high ratio of perlite. So I have not been doing it at that high ratio before, but I just started doing it. And I think, yeah, it makes sense to me. So we'll see how that does in terms of helping cut down on things like fungus and molds and stuff like that. we're doing okay. We don't have a problem with fungus and molds kind of overtaking everything. There's a couple of trays that have it versus others, most that don't. But yeah, those are some thoughts on the watering front. Zinnias. It's the last group of flowers I plant from seed for the season, aside from the sunflowers. And the sunflowers are something that I do either at the same time as the zinnias, so pretty soon here, or it's something I would do dead last in my planting. Zinnias have been the workhorse of our flower garden in the past. They will start blooming and continuing putting off blooms if routinely harvested all the way through the end. And they usually start sometime late June, early July, and then they keep going until like September or mid-October. Last year I got the zinnias in the ground late, so we actually didn't see any blooms until late July. But in my gardening memory, I had a much longer bloom time than that, starting earlier in the season, like early July, late June, early July. So that's what I'm hoping for this year. Seeds that are going in now and we'll have plants ready to be in the bed by, say, late May, 1st of June is what I'm planning for and hoping for. We're growing many different varieties and colors of zinnias this year, so stay tuned to see how they turn out.
Here's what I planted from seed this week. Zinnias, lots of varieties, lots of trays. A third round of lettuce and a third round of bok choy. And then I potted up the peppers.